I thought I knew every corner of the land my family had owned for decades. But one afternoon, I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. A massive mansion had been built right on the highest part of my property, and the HOA president was living inside it. At first, I wondered if I had somehow gotten the property lines wrong. So I pulled out the old survey map my father had left me. The boundary line ran straight through that hillside. According to my documents, that mansion wasn't supposed to be there. I checked the survey again, then checked it one more time. There was no mistake. The land belonged to me. The mansion, the driveway, and part of the surrounding grounds were inside my boundary. That's when I decided to confront the HOA. Richard Hayes, the HOA president, didn't even look surprised when I showed him my map. He simply told me the property had already been incorporated into the community. According to him, the HOA had every right to use it. I asked him one simple question. Then where is your proof? Richard told me the HOA had purchased the land years ago. But when I asked to see the purchase documents, his confidence suddenly changed. He said the records were complicated and that I should trust the board. I knew right then that something wasn't right. That night, I went through every document my family had kept. Buried inside an old metal filing box, I found the original deed. It showed the exact boundaries of the property. And there was something else. The land had never been sold to the HOA. The deed matched the survey perfectly. The mansion was sitting inside my legal property boundary. The HOA story suddenly had a very serious problem. Now I needed someone who could turn those documents into evidence. The next morning, I took everything to a property attorney. She studied the deed, the survey, and the county records without saying much. After nearly an hour, she finally looked up at me. She said, "Jack, if these records are authentic, the HOA has a major problem." We went straight to the county records office to verify everything. I didn't want assumptions. I wanted official records. The clerk pulled up the historical property file and compared the boundary records. Then she confirmed exactly what my deed had already told me. The county records showed no legal transfer of my land to the HOA. The property was still registered under my name. For the first time, I knew I wasn't fighting a rumor. I had official proof. And now, I was ready to take that proof straight to court. We gathered certified copies of every record we could find. My attorney organized a deed, survey, and county documents into one file. This wasn't going to be an argument between a homeowner and an HOA anymore. It was going to be a legal case backed by official records. Meanwhile, Richard had clearly realized that something was wrong. I heard he had started making calls to the HOA board. They had built their entire story around the idea that the land belonged to them. Now they were facing records that said otherwise. The HOA board held an emergency meeting that evening. Richard insisted that their original paperwork proved they controlled the property. But when the board members started comparing the documents, questions began piling up. Nobody seemed willing to explain how the mansion had ended up on my land. The next day, the HOA sent someone to talk to me directly. They offered to resolve the misunderstanding without involving lawyers. I listened politely, but I wasn't willing to ignore the evidence anymore. I told them that any agreement would have to be handled through my attorney. A few days later, my attorney sent the HOA a formal notice. It demanded that they recognize my ownership and stop treating my property as community land. We gave them a chance to correct the situation peacefully. Instead, their response was to deny everything. Their response claimed the HOA had a right to property through an old community agreement. My attorney immediately spotted the problem with that argument. An HOA agreement couldn't simply erase a recorded property deed. So we prepared to let a judge decide. On the morning of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse with my attorney. I had spent years avoiding legal battles whenever possible. But this time, I wasn't walking in empty-handed. I was carrying the original evidence, proving where my land began and ended. Richard arrived with the HOA's attorney and a thick stack of paperwork. He still looked confident when the hearing began. But confidence doesn't replace evidence in a courtroom. The judge asked both sides to explain exactly who owned the land. My attorney started with the oldest document, the original deed. Then she presented the certified county survey showing the exact boundary. One by one, the records contradicted the HOA's claims. Richard's confident expression slowly disappeared. The judge studied the map for several minutes without saying a word. Then he asked the HOA attorney to explain the conflicting boundary records. There was a long silence before the attorney finally admitted they had no newer deed transferring the property. That was the moment I knew the case had completely changed.